We're ready to roll. Let's go.
Hey, how you doing?
What's happening?
You know, just getting ready for Christmas and doing all the stuff.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
just getting ready to, I was gonna run out to take a restroom break, but Thomas told me I can't, I'm not allowed to. I have to hold it. So
Okay, well, this will be a shorter podcast than most, perhaps,
that's how we get started on the Walk podcast, right? We
Keeping it real. You said you're keeping it real, so this is real.
I told you I'm keeping it real. Hold on, I'm gonna move you so when it doesn't look like I'm staring off into space while we're talking.
No problem. I may stare off into space a little bit myself.
How you been?
Doing really good. Doing really good.
Time flies. I just saw you like a couple months ago, but it feels like it's been forever.
I know. Well, it's time. I feel like we're in this weird time warp, because we're not seeing each other or people like we're used to seeing. And so yeah, it's like I feel like I just saw you, but yet it was 100 years ago. And then before that, it was 5 years ago, but it wasn't. It was only a year, like, I don't know.
It was weird. Well, because that in September when I saw you,
Yeah.
It had been forever since anybody had really been traveling.
And so
everybody was so happy to see people. And then here we are again, where stuff seems to maybe starting to slow down. What part of the country are you in? Remind me, you're in the Midwest, right?
Minneapolis. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How is it up there? Like, are you noticing things starting to pull back a little bit and businesses?
Depends on what way you mean. Minneapolis has been a fascinating place to live for the last year and a half, from pretty much any level that you can you can imagine. So
totally.
It's cold. It's honestly, it's restaurants and things like that are fairly open, and so like that's all been good. But the city in particular, because I'm in Minneapolis, the city's in a lot of turmoil, still,
just in general. Yeah. Well, it's funny. We all end up in our own little bubbles with everything that's going on right now. And although you watch the news and you know what's going on, you still sort of pull back. Our fun news in our town and over the last couple of days was that, now remember this, Hickory, North Carolina is not a big town or anything. So that a local business person got busted for embezzling like $15 million from their former company. And it was one of those, you're always asking yourself, how are these people living so high on the hog? And then a couple of years later, you figure it out when the news breaks.
Yeah. You know what? I've seen a few things like that over my career where it's kind of like, you do. You kind of like, how are you doing like this life? And suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, I actually there's an interesting story like that from earlier in my career. I'll tell you, somebody that I was at the place I was at a broker shop, and I was super competitive, and I loved to win, and I loved originating, and I was the top producer. Now, again, it was not a big place, but
go ahead, pump yourself up. It's fine.
So I'd win the top producer, big Crystal Award, right? And so I'd be so, I liked it, I was competitive. So I recruited somebody in from elsewhere who was a former colleague of mine that I was like, oh, he's a great guy, big producer. But sure enough, that year he beat me, right? He got the big, huge Crystal Award, and I got like the, little one. But I was like, you know what? It's okay. I was a little like, but I was like, that's all right. And then we found out later that he was totally committing fraud. And that was how he'd won, is he'd closed all kinds of loans and was committing fraud and got totally busted for it.
Did the company put the little asterisk next to his name on the Hall of Fame board? Did you didn't get your rightful prize?
Isn't it like sick that like I cared? I was like, I should have gotten the big award.
Of course you care, because you're competitive.
A little competitive. Yeah, I am a little bit.
How did you get into mortgage banking? Well, I there's a lot that I want to ask you.
Good story.
So one is how you got in, and then, well, let me just start there. So tell me, like, when you're in college, did you even think you'd be a mortgage banker, or tell me about it?
No, oh my God. So when I was going to college, I remember actually I was kind of jealous of the people who were, they wanted to be an attorney or a nurse or whatever, because it was like so clear cut. And mine was like, I don't know, like some businessy, maybe financy, marketing-y, like literally I didn't know what I was doing, So But I remember I had actually dropped out of college and was working full time, but then I went back to school. So I was going back to school full time, working full time, and trying to kind of, figure it all out. But I was working at a credit union, and I remember we got robbed like a number of times. And the last time that we were robbed, and I was working, at a branch in Minneapolis, and it was my roommate and one of my best friends who was robbed the last time at gunpoint. And I had to go down with her to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And, she was looking at mug shots. I mean, it was all this like whole thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I got to get out of this branch and go. I was like opening checking accounts and, things like that, doing car loans, whatever. But I was like, I got to get out of this branch. And the only job that was open was a mortgage processor at this branch out in the suburbs. And I was like, I don't know what the heck that is, but I'm going to go give being a mortgage processor, a chance. And that was about 30 years ago. So
you were fleeing gunfire, which is how you got into mortgage
basically banking. I was fleeing for my life is what happened. And but everybody's got a weird story about how they got into the mortgage business, right?
It's one of the coolest things about the industry that it's proof that, it proves so many things, but it's such a relationship driven industry. How many times you hear stories of, I was on my way to be an attorney. I was talking to somebody not that long ago that was in medical school, and that's what they were going to do. And they were relatively deep into it. And they showed up at a party, and a buddy of theirs came, back from whatever they were doing. And he's driving a super expensive car and he's wearing an expensive watch. And the guy's like, what are you doing for a living? And he said, I'm a mortgage banker. And obviously he was successful, or he was committing fraud like your buddy from back in the day, one or the other. And then that guy said, well, maybe I should do this part-time to help put myself through medical school. And then he just stayed in mortgage. 20 years later, he's running a company, right?
Well, yeah, it's a cool, I think people fall in love with it. I mean, you either do or you don't, and I don't know. I fell in love with it.
How do you, so you're a processor, and at the time, were you going to school also? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yep. I was a processor, and I was going to school full time. And then I finally graduated and kind of started looking around, and I ended up getting a job and I was doing, so I was doing mortgages. And the cool thing at doing it in this kind of smaller credit union is I got to learn everything,
Right.
You just got to learn every single bit of the process. But I went to work actually for Countrywide. It was my first kind of big company, mortgage job. And that was a cradle to grave operation as well. Mm-hmm. And kind of went on from there. But I just, I fell in love with it just because it is, I always say like the people that make, like computer mice are like, we help people click things, but we actually help put people into homes. Like these are where people's lives happens, where, families are, and where you do your holidays and you laugh and you cry, and like life is happening in your home, and it builds neighborhoods and communities. And I just think, and it's also the largest financial transaction of most people's lives. And so really helping people do that properly and harnessing the power of the mortgage, kind of both gets you here, but you have to really know what you're doing from a strategic level as well. So I've always loved it.
As competitive as you are, though, so this is going to sound like a weird question, but I'm just going to ask it. I sometimes when I'm in front of groups, I'll ask a question about why are you in this industry? Why do you choose to be a mortgage banker? And generally the people that I might be in front of are on the sales side, right? They're branch managers, regionals, heads of production, maybe loan officers even. And usually the answers that they give relate to lifestyle. I mean, it's freedom. I'm competitive. I want to be a job where I can be successful, but I can go to my kid's baseball game.
Yeah.
But the reason I say those things is because I preface it by saying one of your answers is you're not allowed to say the dream of home ownership. Like you're not allowed to say that. You have to say other things.
Yeah.
And the reason is that may be foundationally one of the reasons, but what keeps you really good at what you do and engaged on a bad day are usually these other things as well. If you weren't in this industry, have you thought about what else you might be doing? Or let me ask it differently. You have those things as well, but do you think that what you just said about building communities, did you get that right away, or did you have to learn that was really where your passion was in this industry?
I learned that over time.
You did.
You have a lot of, you have good days and you have bad days, and you have days where you're like tearing your hair out saying, why am I in this industry? Because it makes me crazy. Right. And so it came over time. For me, Part of the driver early on, I mean, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it because I like working with people, and I liked, I liked it. But it was also something, once I got divorced and was single momming, and, I realized I could make as much money as I wanted or needed to. And it was in my hands as an originator. And there is something about that for me was it's interesting because it made me feel at peace and feel safe. And it sounds weird because sometimes and I used to think, before I had gone on 100% commission, I was like, oh my God, that'd be so scary, like the lack of security. I felt total security when I was on commission because it was just all up to me. And I believed in myself and I trusted myself. And I knew if I needed to do something to make a little extra money, I could figure out how to do another loan. And so for me, it was just there was a security in being totally on commission, oddly enough, that
so kind of security and control that you knew that you had control. Yeah. So I'm asked a question, and it's a little personal, I guess, but I think a lot of people can relate. You were talking about how you went through a divorce, single mom. You were early in your career still, right? And the risk was on you because you were 100% commission. Do you remember times where, well, I guess my question is, when you go through life events, right, things can get in the way of then what you're trying to accomplish from a career perspective. Were there things that you found that you did that helped bring you back to center, where you weren't really freaking out about being a single mom and getting used to that and taking care of your child and being straight commission? I'm curious, any tricks that you found, and maybe you didn't know what those were until 10 years later.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But I'm looking back, were there things that you did that helped sort of center you and keep you on track?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and it did take me a while to learn, because that's the trick with being 100% in commission is, you're always on, and it's hard to say no when it's like, you're kind of thinking about these relationships. But a couple of things that I did that worked for me is, one is I was militant with my time blocking. And I just was militant with it. If I needed to get something done, whether it was personal or professional, I would put that in my calendar, and I would treat those appointments with myself as seriously as anything. I mean, just even something dumb like, getting my nails done. Because I knew that if I was doing my thing, and I could always, sounds dumb, but I didn't present as well if I didn't have like my nails done. And so I was like, that's okay. I can make that part of my business plan, but I got to get my nails done, and so, but just time blocking things and prioritizing the things for my daughter and myself, that were important. I would say outsourcing was probably one of the most important things that I did, is delegating. Very quickly after I'd gotten divorced, I learned very fast that I either needed to be spending my time in my career and making money, or 100% with my daughter and my family. And all the other stuff, it's like, what if I can do one more loan a month, and that could pay for somebody to do all the crap I don't want to do, like doing, the laundry and the dishes. I was like, I'm going to figure out how to do one extra loan. And so it's funny. I remember a story actually with a realtor who was a really good friend of mine, very high producing realtor. And I remember talking to her one day, and she was just swearing up a storm and griping because she was stuck in traffic. And I was like, well, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm delivering these flyers out to, Timbuktu somewhere. And I was like, you have an assistant. I was like, what are you doing? Like driving flyers around like to, this place. And she's like, I'm not going to pay somebody $15 an hour to go drive around. And I'm like, but it's like based on what she was making, she was making probably 500 grand a year. So she was making $250 an hour. She was paying herself $250 an hour to do something her assistant could be doing for 15. But so making that shift and saying the value of my time, unless I really love to do this thing, I'd rather be spending the time playing board games with my daughter, or being at her events, or, building my business. So those were two really important things, the time blocking and the delegating.
Isn't that a hard thing to do, though, for people that are generally successful in commission type of job, sales, relationship, or otherwise, where that's what you should be doing? You should create efficiencies, because that's really what you just described, right? Delegating to create efficiencies so that you can spend time doing the things that you want to do or need to do. But then there's a control factor to it. You have to be willing to give up some level of control. So your friend that was the agent, is it really the $15 an hour, or is it the control?
Yeah, I think that's true. And you do have to decide, it's like, you can make those, but we all have to make those decisions professionally, right? I mean, somebody can say, any business person can say, any CEO, I'm probably best at selling this deal and doing this thing, whatever, but you can never scale. You could never, right. You're never going to have all the things that you want if you can't say, hey, you know what? I have to delegate this thing, and yeah, they might do it differently, but it just, I'm going to say that that's less important than some of these other things in my life. And quite honestly, I would find the more that I really got into the delegating and learning how to utilize other sources, both personally and professionally, you know what, but half the time, more than half the time, I would say they did it way better than I would have, whatever the thing was. I mean, it's fast. That's been a fascinating thing just over my career is, man, it's like the more, I don't know, the older you get, the more the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. There's just so many brilliant people out there, yourself included. I mean, every time, you and I connect and I have a conversation with you and I hear what you're doing, I'm just like,
well, brilliant and me are used not words that live in the same sentence. I'm sure Thomas Sealbinder, who's in the background right now, is laughing to himself. But thank you for that. We'll cut that soundbite and hold it forever. I'll keep that forever.
It's really good that I'm on mute right now. That's for sure.
You stay on mute, Sealbinder. You don't get to comment.
It's true though.
No, well, you're right. I remember when I started doing what I do at some level and just go back to commissions sales, because that's really that's the part that matters the most.
Yeah.
Was that, you and I are similar, super competitive. I want to win. I'm always going to look for that next thing that I'm not winning at and then try to improve upon that or whatever. But yeah. I remember there was an admin that worked for this company, and she came into my office. Well, I don't think I had an office. She came into my cubicle one day and she said, you need to stop doing these things. I was doing administrative things. That was her job, but I didn't trust her enough. And I wanted control to do it a very specific way. But she was the one, without realizing it, that taught me about scale, because she came into the cubicle and said, you need to stop doing these things for two reasons. Number one, it's my job. It's what I get paid for, and you're not going to replace me. Secondly, there's no way. And I think she asked me, what's your goal? Like, what it is that you're trying to accomplish? How much, revenue do you want to generate, as an example? And I gave her some answer, and she said, you're never going to hit that goal if you don't allow me to do this part of the job. And I'll never forget that. And I'll tell you, it's something I still really, really struggle with. I struggle with it with my children. It's like, something's wrong with the toilet and you got to replace the toilet. Do you do it yourself, or do you bring your son over or daughter over and say, come here, I'm going to show you how to do this so that you know how to do it later on? By the way, also scales my life, because they're not calling me over to their house to go change their toilet, because they know how to do it.
Actually, that's so brilliant. And I'm glad you said that, because that is probably something that is maybe the flip side of some of the decisions that I did make, is that I did outsource a lot of those household things, and I didn't probably say perhaps often enough, hey, let's grab our rakes and go, like, a lot of times outsource some of those things. So I do think sometimes, there's a time or two that Emily was just like, why do we not know how, X works? And I'm just like, oh, I'm sorry, but I just literally never taught you how to do that. And so I love that you brought that up, because I do think that, for people listening that have children, that's a beautiful thing, is to teach them. I taught my daughter outsourcing and delegation, I guess. Right. But I do think that there's a lot to be said for digging into some of those activities and doing it together.
Well, and for me, some of that stuff is just what brought me joy. Like I was asking you, when you hit those moments in your life, going through a personal event that's maybe a real challenge, if you're not careful, it'll negatively impact everything in your life. It'll take your career away from you if you're not careful. So what are the things that bring you back to focus again? And for me, it was literally as simple as sometimes going outside and digging a ditch, or chopping a tree down, or building something, or just getting dirty. So go back to Countrywide. You land with Countrywide. At this point, you're originating, right? You're not a processor anymore.
Processing.
Oh, you did?
Okay. We were called, I forget what we were called, maybe home loan consultants, or no, that's what I think they called the process. A mortgage specialist. That's what we were. We were mortgage specialists. And but it was you learned so much. And I remember actually And I still am friends with the two people that I went to work for, the branch manager and then the underwriter that was in the office, still good friends of mine. And I remember the day when the branch manager, and this, by the way, this is back in the day, everything's manual. I mean, I think about it now, like even to look for property, and depending on the age of your listeners, some people will relate to this and some totally won't. But the listings used to come in a book, like a big phone book looking thing would show up. And that's how you'd look for houses. You'd be like, paging through this like crazy, thick thing. But I remember one day the branch manager was like, I want you to take this loan application. And the guy coming in was like, he was like an attorney and he was like very high end. And I was like, I didn't know how to take a loan app. I mean, I didn't know. And he's like, yeah, you do. He's like, you'll be fine. And I was like, no, I'm not. And I remember sitting behind his giant desk and I'm sitting there like, hello, Mr. Green, and I literally like, I had no idea what I was doing, like no idea. And I remembered feeling just like so horrified, but what it lit up in me was something where I was like, I will never let that happen again. And I'm going to learn how to take an application. I'm going to take the best damn application that anybody ever took, because it just, I didn't want that feeling. So I remember, Countrywide was kind of a unique place because we were not on commission at Countrywide. And so you could actually, I was an underwriter. I had all my, I was delegated. I could do FHA, VA, conventional. So I could originate, process, sign off of my own loans, close it, fund it, ship it. I mean, we were literally cradle to grave. And so you just learned a ton, so I learned a lot at Countrywide. So think of it, whatever people think of it, but they were way ahead of their time. I learned a ton. Probably didn't get paid what I should have for the production I was doing. But I learned a lot and it was a great springboard into the rest of my career.
Well, and now most careers are so specialized, right? Like we've removed the need for the originator to do a lot of what you were doing back then. Same thing on the operational side. When you look at the development of so many technology platforms that have created efficiencies and streamlined movements in the process. But I also think that like we're missing, I don't think just we, so forget the industry. I just think as a human race or whatever, that things are so specialized. You kind of went through I think of like the Miyagi kind of training where, Mr. Miyagi's teaching you how to wax on, wax off, right? But you haven't blocked a kick, you haven't blocked a punch or a kick yet. Well, there was a point to painting that fence and there was a point to sanding the deck and there was a point to waxing the car. We're not doing that so much anymore. You enter a space where you're incredibly specialized and there's things that are then missing potentially as far as your ability to be a consultant from cradle to grave. That wasn't a question. That was just me talking.
No, but it's true. It's a really interesting point. And I do think to be great in the mortgage industry, there are a lot of facets to it, and so presuming that you've got a lot of originators that listen to your podcast, it is not easy. I mean, you have to be, a compliance specialist. You have to be a strategist for how to, really almost like a financial planner to understand all of the different options. You have to be a great researcher. You have to be a psychologist sometimes. You have to be a great presenter, a great connector, communicator. You have to be a relationship builder. I mean, those are generally not all things that come together in one package. And so it's one of the reasons, as I said, I stay so in love with this industry, even though I'm not on the origination side anymore. I serve, originators and lenders, and I just have so much respect for what they do every single day because it's hard.
I describe it as it's not like we're not doing open heart surgery, but it's really hard. And open heart surgeons can't do this. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's really difficult. So at what point in your career did you realize that maybe there was an opportunity for you to get a little creative with what you were doing? I remember when I first met you, I'm not going to tell you when that was though, because I want to hear your answer to this question first. So at what point eventually you're originating, you're crushing it, you're growing your business, you're developing a lot of success. But what was the point where Sue Woodard became Sue Woodard, if you know what I mean?
That is a funny question. And we met in the early 2000s, I think, relative to CTX.
Where were you? Do you remember?
CTX. Yeah.
Yeah, you do remember. That makes me feel good. Yes, you were at CTX. Yeah, that's right. I think Danny Deaton introduced us. And you were working with Barry at the time, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, I remember it well. So I would say there was two big shifts that I made. One was kind of in the early 2000s. Yeah, I had the opportunity to start working with Mortgage Market Guide and helping to build that business, which was a lot of fun. But I was still originating. I was being a national sales trainer and, doing all these things on the origination side, but also doing some things over on this other side, kind of being a vendor, serving the industry.
Right.
And, doing that as a single mom and traveling and like doing all this stuff, really got to kind of a boiling point. And then when 2007 and 8 happened, we actually had sold Mortgage Market Guide it was June 30th of 2007. Never forget it, because it was about 14 seconds before everything started melting down.
My gosh.
But, I was still involved in the business. But I remember in 2008, at that point, you needed to make a choice about, like which path were you going to go down, and you had to go down that path 150%. So as much as I was glad I had the first pivot where I kind of added on to my origination, this other cool thing with building this business and serving the industry, that was the second inflection point in 2008, where it's like, I have to decide, am I going to go full on into lending, or am I going to go full on into the vendor side? And at that time, I chose the vendor side just because I really enjoyed it. I think it gave me a little bit, I just enjoyed serving the industry because I love the industry. I love what the industry does. And it felt like it gave me an opportunity to work with more people and serve more people. And I really understood the shoes they were walking in and the road they were on. And hopefully, again, my goal has always been to try to serve better, because I do know the important work that they're doing and how hard.
Well, anybody that knows you knows that, that's how you're viewed. You do serve the industry, you serve companies within the industry, people within the industry. But let's go back for a second. 2008, 9, the world's coming to an end. People are, all of a sudden their incomes are down a lot. I can speak from personal experience on, God bless my wife. I can speak from personal experience on that. But who's that?
That's my cat.
What's your cat's name?
This one's Bella. So they get aggressively affectionate sometimes especially when I'm doing things like this. So they're.
Do they also get aggressive when somebody they don't know comes into the house?
No, they'd be terrible, like attack cats. But
what kind of cat is that?
Friendly. It's called a ragdoll. So
it's called a ragdoll. So it looks sort of like a Siamese, but it's not.
I know. Yeah. They're like Siamese, but they just have long, fluffy hair, and they're just.
I had a buddy that had a Siamese growing up, and if somebody walked into the house that they didn't know, they would attack it. There was a little perch next to the door they would sit on, and it would, no joke, jump like on the back of your neck. It was ridiculous. An attack
kind
cat.
Of early warning system. I kind of like that.
Well, it was just don't come back to this person's house anymore. Is what it was.
No,
So, okay. So go back. Was there a moment where you thought for a second, and by the way, your cats are more than welcome to be a part of this. Let them climb
they
all
may
over.
be.
Was there a part where you actually thought about getting out of the industry? And maybe not just so much you proactively thinking, I want out of this industry, but were there other options that maybe had you thinking, maybe now's a good time to pivot in a different direction?
No.
Never did.
No, really
never
not.
wavered.
No. No, and I think because we had, sold the business and, I had an opportunity. So I felt very blessed and fortunate that I kind of had this thing, really in place. And we had to make a lot of sacrifices and shifts in the business and changes based on what was going on, to try to figure out, well, how do we serve better now?
Right.
With the shift that's going on. No, but at that point, like I said, I got into financial services in 1990 and, mortgage is very early on in that. And, at that point, I was just in deep, it's like I'd been doing this for so long, and it's what I knew, and it's what
right.
not only what I knew, but what I loved. And so I kind of looked at it and I thought, I don't know. I honestly, I never even really have seriously looked outside of the mortgage business, because I genuinely I love this business. And I do think that for me, when my expertise is in this, it's not only what I love, but it's where I think I get the most probably, I guess value, some of the things that I do and the connections that I have and the people that I love and the things that I'm able to do, especially with, there's all these people coming into the business, which I think is lovely. I just kind of imagine myself, I can't imagine myself in another industry at this point. And I'm, at this point, I'm the ripe old age of 52. I've been in this financial services and mortgage for the bulk of it for 31 years. And so I think if
you're like, what else am I going to do?
Have me, I don't want to go somewhere else.
But that was also 2008. I mean, that was, it feels like it was just yesterday, but it was a while back.
Yeah. But no, I just honestly, I can't say that I ever considered anything else. I mean, It just felt like there was always an opportunity there. It's where my heart was at. I was still at that point. I mean, I still had, my kid to raise. And so again, I thought I can always go back into origination, if I need to, but that was not easy either. Nothing was easy then. But
no. I remember that period of time, somebody, Joe Anderson, that had been at Countrywide, right?
Yeah.
And I think at the time, I can't remember where Joe, Nation Star, maybe. Anyway, Joe, for those that don't know who Joe Anderson, who's now Joe's retired, hopefully barefoot water skiing somewhere.
Exactly.
Joe's legend, and he's got a matrix type brain. I understand 5% of what he's saying, but I really pay attention to that 5%. And Drew Waterhouse, my partner, and I, we were in the midst of pulling together a company from the ashes of what was happening in the industry. And I remember Joe said, you guys are going to find success, but it's going to be really hard for a couple of years. It's going to be really, really hard. And he was right, but we needed to hear that from him, that this was sort of a bit of a buy low moment for those that are in the industry or those coming into the industry, because it was one heck of a reset. And I wonder how for you, the timing was moving over, you call it the vendor side, let's call it the partner side, right? You were moving over more to the partner side. Do you feel like the timing was maybe also really good because companies and individuals needed that consult maybe more than ever before?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think you needed to be really smart about what it was you were offering, because there was no like, oh, well, we've just got, let's add this on as a nice to have, it's like, be really, really smart. But lenders needed to be really smart and really thoughtful about the investments they were making. And I took that really seriously. And still do. I mean, every dollar that's coming into a vendor or partners, it was, an originator by and large generated it. Right. And so I just, like I said, I always take that very seriously. But I think it challenged all of us at that time. I'm sure you as well, you had to get really sharp and you had to get really, if you weren't 100% committed, I mean, you really had to be committed at that point to what you were doing to try to make it work and really be on your game.
And you had to outwork everybody else. And you almost had to outwork yourself at some level. I think I was, on the one hand, you could look at it as we're talking about these life events, right? Maybe it was the worst timing because my kids were really small, and we had made a decision that Nikki was going to stay at home and raise the kids. So on the one hand, the pressure can crush you. On the other hand, the pressure is actually also what motivates you. Like, exactly why you're going to do what you're doing every day, even on top of maybe enjoying what you do. You have that. I mean, people call it the why, right? I mean, whatever you want to call it, there's no question about why you're leaving the house early in the morning to go do your thing. Exactly why you're doing it. And that's an awfully easy motivator. Sometimes we find that in the worst of times, not in the best of times.
Well, the other thing that I would tell you is that I'm an extremely conservative, person. And so I had saved a bunch of money because I was just, certainly nobody knew anything like that was coming, but just that's part of, I think, feeling this, like the pressure it was on me. I didn't have somebody else who's like, well, either it's, you're going to make some more and I'll make less and whatever. I mean, it was just me. And so I had saved money, for a rainy day, and there were certainly rainy days in there, right? And I think that's another thing to be thoughtful of, particularly right now where this industry is at. People have made a lot of money, in the last few years, and, God bless them, I mean, really, like people have worked their butts off, but I hope that people have also been thoughtful about, treat yourself to some stuff, but save some money. I remember people early on in my origination career, I'd meet with some of the new originators coming in, and they're like, oh, this is pretty, it seems pretty easy, 28, 36, and you go like do this and that, and you make a ton of money. And I'd watch these, people coming in and they're buying these big houses and these cars that, I was like, I would never dream of like living that kind of lifestyle. And I guess, everybody's got to make their choices, but I mean, it certainly was something else that paid off for me, is being conservative with my spending. Yes, I did. I choose to say I invested money and having people, do some things such that I could be focused on my daughter or my career. But those were investments for me. But I also, I think saving some money along the way paid off.
I remember 2005-ish. I was talking to a regional manager for a really big bank-owned mortgage company. And maybe it was 2006. I mean, we were getting close to the bubble popping. And I asked her, what concerns you? Like just in general, what concerns you about the industry? What concerns you about the region? What concerns you about your company? Conversations like you and I are having right now, right? And she said something that surprised me, but I won't forget it. She said, well, what concerns me is every day I look out in the parking lot and I see my loan officers are driving a ridiculously expensive car that they just bought, or they just purchased an insanely expensive beach house or a boat. And she was worried because she knows, look, the train's going to pull into the station at some point. There's going to be a reset. There's going to be a recalibration. And what I worry is that they've now set their lifestyles at a level that they can't maintain.
Precisely.
And there was a lot of lessons learned then, but I wonder, are we so far removed that we've got a lot that may have to learn a tough lesson again at some point?
I mean, I think one good thing is the industry still has a lot of tenure in it, and I think the average age of an originator is coming down because there are some, younger people who have gotten into the business. I actually think it's like 51 or 52 right now, because I feel like I was, I finally am like a little bit over the mark of like the average originator. But so I think people still, as much as people can have short-term memory, like even now as we're making this transition into a much more purchase-centric market, you have this refinance muscle memory, and you've been doing things in a certain way, right? Where it's much more about just getting them through and, speed to close and getting it done. Whereas purchase is a little different. You've got to, you got to strengthen those purchase-centric muscles again. Not that we don't know how to do purchases. So people have a short-term memory in some ways, but I do think that anybody who's still operating right now that went through 2008, it left a mark, and people learned lessons during that time. I mean, and so I would like to think, I don't know, but I would like to think that people were maybe a little wiser this time around and made some different choices.
With what you're doing now with Stratmor, and also your speaking engagements and the coaching consulting that you do, I consider it coaching whenever you're standing up in front of a group of people, because if they don't take that away as some coaching, then they're missing the point.
Yeah.
When you're at those events, or when you're actually in formal meetings via Stratmor and your position with them, what are some of the things you're hearing right now that are the biggest concerns coming from individuals and leaders and companies?
It's a great point. The biggest things that I'm hearing right now are very much related to this the shift or the pivot.
That was, you just got Yiddish on me. I'm not sure if that was a real word, but it definitely sounded Yiddish.
A little Yiddish there. Well, it's funny because Bill Dallas at Finance of America, he has kind of like a word of the year, a phrase, it was all in last year, this year's pivot. And I'm talking about this pivot to the purchase. So people are talking about, kind of the same things that we worried about during these market cyclicalities before, is thinking about, okay, how do you remain, how do you get more efficient? How do you make sure that you're, number one, paying attention to the customer experience, because purchase is different than refinance. It's not just about shooting people through the system as quickly as possible. You have to have a good customer experience, but how do you do that in a way where you can be more scalable? People are talking about the combination of, technology and human. Where do you make the investments in technology? How are you ensuring that the investments you've made in technology are paying off? How are you really paying attention to the outcomes that you're getting? I think that's a big topic of conversation. Is right now everybody's kind of pulling back and looking at their tech stack, saying, okay, are all these things talking to each other? Are we actually getting the outcomes that we need? Is the data going into the right places? Or did we just kind of throw in a bunch of shiny objects during, while we were standing in the money machine for the last 18 months? You know, people are taking some good critical looks at their tech stacks, which I think is, yeah, it's very smart. You know, it's how you run a smart business, but it also is a good note for the vendors and partners out there to say, you know, that's on people's minds right now, is ensuring that they know they're getting the right outcomes out of that, you know, whether it be a technology or tool or what have you. A lot of conversations about e-closing, you know, kind of the good, bad, and difference of that. My personal opinion, and just interesting listening to people talk about it, I think in a purchase world, e-closing is a little, like a pure e-closing is probably a little less significant than it was in refis, but all these conversations started during refis as a way to get a little bit more efficient, right? But, you know, talking about how do we create a great hybrid? You know, so it really is. And I think the other piece is just knowing that originators are also having the chance to kind of pull up and take a breath. Nobody's been able to move, right? In terms of, you know, making decisions about, am I at the right company that's at the right place for me? You know, now is the time, as you know, that, you know, both companies are saying, do we have the right, you know, people, you know, here do they fit with our culture? Does our culture fit with them? And originators are getting that chance as well. And so, you know, whether you're an originator or you're leading a company, this is an issue that is going to be impacting you in the year ahead. As you know, this is your sweet spot.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of things that people talk about, though, that they don't have teeth, if you know what I mean. Like, you almost need the market adjustment to start seeing the teeth with adjustments that then do ultimately get made. I want to go, you know, you're talking about tech stacks, technology. I want to ask you a little bit about where you see the role of the originator going forward. You know, it's been a long time, as long as I've been in this industry, that you hear technology is going to replace the originator. And that's not a new conversation. This has been going on for a long time. Now, I think that the pandemic and remote work certainly threw gasoline on that in a pretty dramatic way, with technology companies stepping up to create efficiencies as that was happening. But project for me a little bit, like, where is your head on the role of the originator going forward? It certainly changed. It's not the role that you had when you started originating, where you doing everything A to Z. Where is your head on that?
Well, I think, you know, I think it was Esurance had a phrase where they said technology, you know, technology when you need it, and people when you don't, or something like that, you know, where they're saying we want to make technology available to you, but in many cases you need a person. You got to reach out your hand and you need a human being there. So the way that I see it is that, you know, the technology is there to automate all of the things that you can, so that you are freeing up your originator to be there when that person reaches out that hand. So as we look, especially as we're going into a purchase market, I mean, this is just what the consumer is saying, is yes, they want technology to make certain things easier. I want my search to be easier. I want to be notified of certain things on a very proactive basis, that I don't want to have to rely on, you know, necessarily a human remembering to call me. But it's such a personal transaction. People are going through a life event when they purchase a home, right? They are, you know, they could be getting married, getting divorced, somebody had a baby, somebody's got a new job. There's like something happening in their life generally when people are moving to a new home. It's an event, you know? And so generally in that situation, consumers are saying, I do want to be able to reach out my hand and have a person there. And interestingly, it's the millennials and the Zs that more than, you know, I'm an X, and more than the X's and boomers, the millennials and the Z want people, right? Because that's what they're used to. Yes, the technology is like table stakes. You have to have that there, but they want to have a human being that's actually there. So the trick is, how do you get the right combination of things? So it's still an efficient process. And again, if I were originating right now, and even when I was originating, man, I was using the technology we had, ACT is what we had.
That's right. I remember
and
ACT.
So yeah, I used ACT, you know, because I wanted to automate all of these things so that I would be available as the person to be there and do the thing, even with a very rudimentary technology. And I would do the same thing now. It's like, if you do something and you're doing the same thing all the time, and it's just rote and it's the same thing, you should be able to automate that. Find a way to automate that. It's no different than the outsourcing or delegating that we talked about before. Find a way to automate all the things you can, so that you can be more efficient to actually be there. So I still don't feel like the originator is, yes, you know, it's been talked about literally decades now that technology is going to replace an originator. But you probably heard me say before that I believe that technology is not going to replace the originator, but the originators utilizing and leveraging technology will replace the ones who are not.
That's a great way to put it.
Right?
You know, that makes a ton of sense.
The other thing I'll tell you is that I do think that originators are going to be called on to potentially do more, to do more cross-selling, to do more, if, especially in institutions where there's any option of other things that you can present, and I don't think people should feel weird about that. It's a kindness to a customer, right? That if you're able to talk to them about something that, makes their insurance options easier, for example, a really cool company called Matic that makes the insurance options much, much, much easier, right? If you can do something like that, or if you're in a financial institution where there's different products that you can offer, that's a gift to a customer. It's not being like, oh, I should only talk about this thing. If people have their entire financial lives laid open in front of you, that's a great thing to be able to say, hey, based on everything that I've seen, there's a few recommendations I want to be able to give you. So I hope people don't fight that. I think it's a really good thing for consumers.
And it's not new. I mean, if you think back to, and I mean not new even from those originators that aren't with a depository, a credit union, where maybe there's a hub and spoke model. I'm talking about IMBs also, or even brokers for that matter, where I think back to when you were at CTX, and maybe this is wrong, but if I recall, there was like the loan officer for life concept that CTX had. And part of that, as I recall, was that there was an audit of your borrower's financial position and putting you as the originator to show them how you can help them build wealth, or you can help them achieve goals that were 10 years down the road, 20. Now, Dave Savage does this really well, obviously with his platform. But I think that's what you're talking about is even if you're with a company that doesn't provide a ton of cross-sell products inside of a bank environment, let's say, you still have the ability to do the same thing for your borrower.
Absolutely. And when I was originating, and it's some of these things just never change. All my business came from either real estate agents, financial planners, or CPAs, kind of that second set of partners, or my database. I mean, all of them were repeat and referral business out of I would say 60% of my business was repeat and referral out of my database, because it's the loan officer for life, the customer for life concept. Some of these things just don't really ever get old.
Yeah, no, it's as there's probably some saying, right, that as much as things change, they tend to stay the same kind of thing, something along those lines. True. I mean, maybe you and I have just been doing this long enough now to where we have that perspective at this point.
People are people, and this is a people business. And I believe that people do business with people. People don't do business with a company. Nobody's going out there saying, well, I just want to work with this company. I don't care who the loan officer is. People connect with a person because it's a very personal transaction. And
there's another side to that too, right? And that is people leave people also. So I'm sure when you're consulting with these companies right now that are talking about pivoting into this purchase environment, making sure that the right people are on their team, knowing that, to your point, this is when people are now doing the self-audit, what's working, what's not working, should I stay with my current company? Are there tools and resources with my company that I'm not even aware of that I could utilize to make things more efficient? But it's incumbent upon the companies to constantly re-recruit their own employees, or else you've ignored them now for a year and a half when, if you could fog a mirror, you could do 3 million a month in volume. And here we are, to your point, they don't have that trusted relationship with the people that they joined in the first place, and they're going to go find it.
Well, and a huge part of, what I've been doing at Stratmor is really, we're launching a customer experience advisory service. And what we've learned, along the way, or what we've known, I should say, and is coming along with it, is the employee experience goes hand in hand with that. I don't know of a single company that has an amazing customer experience and great, retention and pull through and everything else, where their employee experience or employee journey kind of sucks. Those two, and vice versa. If the employee journey is really good, the employee engagement is high, your customer journey is generally pretty good. And so it's something for lenders to pay attention to. Like, there's a lot of focus, and I've heard, incredible, great business leaders say, we've put a lot of focus on the customer journey and the customer experience, and we have not paid enough attention to the employee experience. And so it is time to ensure that you're connecting with your people. And just because, if you're tired, they're tired too. They've been through, this has been a rough run, right? And it's time to make sure that you are both, if you're managing people, to be connecting with those people and really having those conversations about where they're at and what do they need and what kind of support. It's not just about like, oh, they're not saying anything, so they're probably okay.
Right.
But also as a leader of a company, really paying attention to what is the overall experience of working here. Does it feel good to work here? Are people proud to work here? You know, it's important.
And it does trickle down. Our mutual friend, Dave Zitting, I think years ago, I remember being in a meeting with him, and he made the comment that the loan, I'm pretty sure Dave, if when he listens to this, if I got this wrong, he can feel free to comment and blast me. But it was something along the lines of the loan officers should be our customer. And if we treat the loan officers that way, that'll trickle down ultimately to their customer. And I thought that was a really good way of seeing it and saying it.
Spot on. Yeah. And we've seen some examples, you know, unfortunately recently in the news of people who, you know, probably didn't value their employees as well as they could have, and have, you know, kind of gotten called out and paid the price for it. But I think it's a good reminder. It's a cautionary tale. You know, again,
to be better, you should be better.
You should be better.
hint to the
You said it, not me. But you know what? Like I said, I mean, it's a cautionary tale. I mean, certainly, you know, the price was paid, but it's important for people to look at things like that and, you know, to some extent say, you know, there, but for the grace of God, you know, I mean, it's like people crack and have bad moments, you know.
Oh yeah.
Not gonna pass any judgment on that, but it certainly is a reminder. You better pay attention to how you're talking to your people, and how you're, you know, keeping your arms wrapped around them, because this is a time they will start looking.
Well, and let me tell you, loan officers in this industry, one of the things that's super unique is if they're doing their job the way that we think they should be doing their job, especially if I'm not talking about the ones that are in a call center or a consumer direct platform, or they're having leads provided for them. I'm talking about most of the originators in this business where they're building their book of business through trusted relationships with referral partners and family and friends and past customers. Let me tell you something, that business is transferable. And so if you mess up the process and you don't treat them, you know, in a way that ultimately they want to be with you on a bad day, they can pick up that book of business and take it somewhere else. And it's one of the things that makes this industry a little bit cutthroat, but also really, really wonderful. Like there's checks and balances that are in place that are not hard to see them staring you in the face.
It's also what these challenging times bring you. You know, iron sharpens iron. Yep. And I just think that this is also an opportunity for people to, you know, to really take a breath, level up and say, you know, all right, things are shifting. How are we going to shift? And how are we going to be better? And how are we going to, you know, serve our customers, our loan officers, and our employees better? How are we going to take care of our people so that they can in turn take care of the people who are depending on them?
And during times like this, is also a very emotional industry. It's an emotional industry, even when things aren't crazy busy. There's just emotional period. There's wins and losses. So thinking of that emotion, I heard you speak once and you talked about your amygdala.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your amygdala's name?
Martha. Yeah.
Doesn't Martha stand for something?
Yeah, it was massively, what was it? Something ringing the hysterical alarms. Yeah, I'm forgetting the second A right now, but it was that massive alert ringing the hysterical alarms. But yeah, it is interesting because that's a, you know, that presentation, I talk a lot about how, you know, it's interesting just how we approach doing different things in our business and our lives, you know, because there is this little chunk of your brain that its whole job is to try to, every time you go to do something, like step on a stage and speak, like go apply for a new job, like even go reach out to a new realtor, like, you know, whatever those things are, there's a part of your brain that is telling you, you're probably going to die if you go do this. Right? Massively afraid, ringing the hysterical alarms. That was it.
There it is.
Yeah.
No, I love that, because I think everybody can relate to it, right? Kevin Peranio, I don't think you heard him say this, or maybe you did. I can't remember if it was that day or the next day. He listened to your talk. And for those that don't know KP, you know, he's one of the partners at PRMG. He runs CPO, and he's just an all around super smart and entertaining guy. And he was talking about his amygdala. Do you remember? Did you hear this? Do you remember this? He started talking about his amygdala, and he named it Keith. And so Keith stands for, Keith stands for keeping energy. Oh man, something in the heart, keeping energy in the heart or something like that. Okay. It made sense, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, but that's not the part of the story. The best part of the story was he was explaining what Keith does for him. It tries to protect him. It tries to keep him out of bad scenarios. And then he ended it with just yelling F Keith. And so the rest of the day was just about F Keith, F Keith, F Keith.
Oh my gosh. No, I didn't hear that. And so,
no, you would have remembered that.
Because it is something that I think, anytime that, and let's face it, this year, 2022, it's going to have some challenges. There's going to be every year is going to have challenges. And anytime we do something, it's worth something, it sometimes could be scary, whether it is, a new job or, a new adventure, whatever it is. But I think that's the key, is keeping that in line and saying, I appreciate, thank Martha, thank Keith for, trying to keep us from, dying over, something like stepping onto a stage or taking a new job or doing, whatever. But I would agree with his assessment of also, F Keith.
Well, it's like the day that you had to screw up the loan application to learn how to do it. And then to know that I'm never going to make that mistake again. I want to ask you a couple more questions before we break. So I saw you posted something on LinkedIn today about a check that you just got, and I thought it was really, really cool. Do you want to tell that story real quick? Was that also I think it's a good opportunity for, I think what you're doing with Access Lending Academy is really awesome. And that sort of leads into that.
No, thank you. I actually didn't know if you would have seen that. And I don't bring stories like that personal. I mean, I tell a lot of personal stories, but this one really, this was a hurtful thing that happened. And so for those of you who might not have seen the post, I talked about something that happened. I've got a picture of myself with this check for $5,070. And it's like, why do you have this check? But in 2019, when we had, bought this house that I'm sitting in right now, we ended up having a very unexpected, massive repair project that we needed to do. And my daughter had been, she was just graduating from college and put everything that we owned into storage. We literally had just our clothes and toiletries and a couple kitchen things. And a mistake was made, a clerical error, and the storage company auctioned off our unit with our life in it, right? And it was things that, now granted it's things, but it was things that connected us to, Emily's best friend, committed suicide in high school. And, she had letters and things from Noah and, from family members who are gone now, and love letters that I had, and friends' notes from, things from when I was a child. And just you can't even imagine, you almost have to pretend your house burned down. So I realized you can't fight a company like that. A billion-dollar company, there was no legal way to fight it, because in the fine print, it says that you can't. But I did go to small claims court, and I won, which gave me some closure. And I needed closure over this, because I just couldn't sleep at night still thinking about this, because it was so unfair and wrong what had happened. So I won and got some closure, but I got the most the judge could give me was $5,070. And so I decided, in my desire to want to take something that was just kind of bad juju or bad karma, I want to turn it into something good. I always talk to Emily about this, that, seeing the bright side and, turning something that's bad, how do you find something good in that? And so I donated that money, the $5,070. I made a donation to Access Lending Academy. And what Access is doing is helping people who just, they need a hand up in their life, primarily young people, a lot of diverse people. And it's giving them education, training, and a paid internship, and help in getting placement into the mortgage industry. And I'm on the board along with KP and Brian View and probably a lot of other, cool people that and it's an organization that I'm really proud of. So yeah, I posted the story out there and asked people to join me. So I would love it. Anybody that wants to learn more, it's just accesslendingacademy.com. But there's so many cool ways to get involved. The students are amazing, and I'd love to talk to people more about it. But thank you for bringing it up. It is special to me.
I wanted to ask you about Access, but when I saw that story, holy moly, Sue! I mean, really, you're a much better human being than I think I am.
That was a crazy deal.
I can't imagine. And by the way, Paul was on the podcast. So if anybody wants to, hear more about Paul's story and Access, we talk a lot about it when we sat down and did the walk. And KP's been on, and Brian View's been on. So we've definitely pumped up Access quite a bit. I think what you guys are doing there is fantastic. Before we break, one other question, and I want you to, if there's anything you want to talk about, let's talk about it. What do you do that's not mortgage related that brings you juice, as I describe it? Like what re-energizes you? What fuels the tank, so to speak, when you're not the mortgage banking guru that Sue Woodard is?
You know, what I have fallen in love with over the years is hiking. And getting out into, and I think especially over the last couple of years when there were so many things we could not do, I decided to get really focused on what things can we do. And I realized I can go on road trips and I can go hiking. And so spent a lot of time. We went on some really cool road trips out west. We went, my fiance has a Harley, and I love getting on the back of the Harley and going on a road trip. And it's just like, I loved that. And so we had taken a trip, for example, we went into, down the California coast through Big Sur, went to Sequoia and Yosemite and up into wine country. And we hiked all over the place. And I hiked out Mount Rainier with my brother out in Seattle, went to Bar Harbor, went to Acadia National Park and did amazing hiking this fall. And it is something that outside of all of this, just being out in nature, getting physical exercise, being with people that I love, and a little wind flying through the air, on the car or on a motorcycle is a pretty good thing too. That's awesome. I love it. Anything else you want to talk about before we break? This was great, Sue. You've given us a full hour, which is, I try to keep it to that, but anything we didn't talk about that you want to throw out there? No, I really appreciate this. I appreciate everything that you're doing for the industry. You have been just like a steadfast, force in the industry. I'm just a roach. You just can't kill me. I'm just a roach. I'm still going to be here forever. No, but you know what I do think is I will tell you that I think the longer that I have been in this business, and particularly going through the times that we've been through, even though it was good in the mortgage industry, it was weird. It's a weird time in this world, I'll just say. And It is a time that I have even more appreciation for the people in this business and the people that I have connections to and the people I've been able to stay connected to, that, like you said, my gosh, over the last 5 years, we probably only have gotten to see each other a handful of times, right? But you're right here, you're a friend, you're a true friend. And I know I could reach out by hand to you if I needed help on something. And so, and there's so many people like that in this business. There's so many good people. I think our industry is really unique in that way, is that people are truly connected in a different way. And even though a lot of it's been virtual, but that has taken on, I think, just such a much greater significance and importance to me over the last few years. And it is something I would encourage people listening, keep those connections strong in the industry. Go to the conference, meet the people, reach out on LinkedIn, connect with me, connect with Eric, just stay connected, because you never know where your path is going to go and who you might need to reach a hand out to. And with that, I would also leave it as, if anybody's listening to this, if there's anything I can do to be helpful to any of you, I hope that you will reach out. That's what I love about this business, Eric. And thank you for continuing to make that happen for all of us. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for everything that you do. And look, it's likewise. Anything that you're doing, Access, Stratmor, otherwise, that I can jump in or we can jump in and help in any way, we'll do it. Number one, because I know it'll create value. Number two, it'll probably be fun if you're involved. So we always try to keep it fun, right? So thank you for that, Eric. I really appreciate it. Yep. No sweat. I should also end with the saying we're recording this in the end of December, but you're going to be our kickoff for 2022. Yay. So I'm looking forward to getting us out early January. So thanks for being our number one for 2022, Sue, and joining us on the walk. I appreciate you. Got it. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Take care. All right. See you, Sue.